Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, Episode 38, Gallo and Rob Boss. Short announcement for the episode. I'd like to reach as many people as possible, and the best way to do that is for you to tell a friend about the show or leave a review on your podcast app. So if you're listening, please take a moment to talk to a friend that might be interested, or give 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your app of choice. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Today I'm talking with Gallo about his world, which is a little different because it's more focused around a villain instead of like a place. So, hi Gallo, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. So at the start, we want to hear more about like who you are outside of RPGs. So you can give us a little quick snapshot of that.
Oh man, so many things. A displaced Texan, widower, and just kind of all around nerd, but I don't look or present as a nerd, so I look kind of like a bad boy. So it's kind of surprising for people to find out that I'm into D&D and all kinds of other things. So
okay,
yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Your voice can definitely pass as a nerd, so don't worry about it.
Of course.
Yeah, voice tells you nothing. And I guess appearances don't either. Well, you said widower. I'm sorry to hear about that.
Oh, no worries. It's going on 7 years now, so it's
okay,
doing better.
Yep. Yeah. It's about different. My sister and my mother like 10 years ago for me, but
oh, okay.
Oh man, more than 10 now. Jeez. But yes, it feels less sharp later on. And you said displaced Texan too? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm stuck in Reno, Nevada now. Tesla suckered me out here, and was here for a couple of years. I've been here for almost 6 years now, or 7 years now.
Okay.
And so, just kind of want to go back home to Texas. But now I think maybe Vegas might be more suited to me because
Okay.
I partake in what's legal and recreational here, and it's not available in Texas. So,
And you said Tesla, they have something in Reno?
yeah, that's the Gigafactory where they make the Model 3s the battery packs and some other components, the drive units for all cars.
Okay, cool. I guess I'd heard that it was actually in Texas, but I think they're talking about moving to Texas, not there yet.
They just added it's a new plant that they created that's going to be making the semis.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Oh, cool. Well, yeah. So how did you get started playing RPGs?
Let's see. Way back in the late 1900s, I had a Super NES and played Link to the Past, Zelda Link to the Past, and kind of got into that one there. And let's see, after that, there was a couple of nerds in my middle school. No, it was middle school, and they played D&D. I think it was 2 point whatever back then, and played a couple times with them, but they were very, very nerdy, like the typical, just geeks, socially awkward. And I just happened to be in honors classes because I had a good memory. It wasn't like I was just smart. It was just, I could remember whatever the teacher was talking about.
Right.
So I was always in honors classes growing up. And so it just kind of bored me and just stayed with video games. Years later, played EverQuest, got on some RPG servers. They were a little too nerdy for me too, or more of like elitist, that if you didn't know all the lore and didn't know all the background, then they kind of make fun of you or whatever. So that kind of turned me off for a while. And then another friend of mine kind of turned me on to Pathfinder, affectionately known as D&D 3.75,
right?
Just because of the rule set. So that one I kind of like more, just because they were nerdy friends, but they were also into other things that were kind of in my wheelhouse as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, like what?
Just roller derby and longboard skating, just all kinds of different stuff. So it wasn't just, your typical nerd or antisocial or socially awkward type of people. It was just, people that just seemed like to have everyday obscure hobbies and D&D or tabletop games.
I feel like there is a lot of overlap between roller derby and longboarding and people who play D&D, like more than what you'd expect from some random sampling.
Exactly, yeah. It was funny to find that because even though derby is a diverse sampling of just all cultures and professional backgrounds and everything, there is that overlap between longboards, derby, kind of obscure music, just tastes, underground bands and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, oh, hey, these are more misfits, but not the punk destroy the world misfits. Just kind of like don't want to follow the system misfits.
Yeah, anything that's kind of counterculture. Yeah, I get what you're saying there.
Exactly.
Okay, you were saying you found this group playing Pathfinder stuff, and it grew from there.
Yeah, I kind of just grew from there, and then just was a player for a couple of years, and eventually I ended up being the one person that had the most experience. Everybody, the new players that I play with, they were interested, wanted to play, or had never done it before. So I ended up doing a lot more homebrew. I had a Dungeon Master guide, or not a guide, player's handbook for rules and all the the damage for AC and everything else that you had to know.
Right.
It kind of got too convoluted for newbies because all they want to do is play. They didn't want to have to do the lore, do their backgrounds, do any of the extra stuff. They just wanted to play. So then it was kind of arbitrary. Okay, what do you want to be? You're going to be a barbarian, a wizard, whatever. So then kind of min-maxed their player sheets for them. And all they had to know is their AC, their damage, and keep track of their inventory, really. So it's kind of streamlined, and this kind of how it evolved, and it's kind of stuck with DMing for homebrew games essentially all the time. And the campaigns were kind of loosely based off of what's it called? When you get ranked with Pathfinder, I forget what it's called, but you can like kind of download the sheets, and I developed them with Home Labs or Hero Labs. It's an app for computer that you can kind of just plug and play all the little things, and based off of whatever the rule set you're using, it'll make your character sheet, and you can do your backgrounds and everything for them. So kind of made it easier for me to kind of manage all the characters without having them to, pick and choose all the minutia of their background, their
Okay. That sounds pretty cool. Is it kind of like D&D Beyond, where you get to like sort of build the character within the computer, and it's just like really
sort of. It is kind of similar that way. Just kind of plug and play. You'll pick your race. It's more like kind of like Baldur's Gate 3 or World of Warcraft, where you just kind of pick your character and your stats are just kind of pre-built, and you can min-max from there. But you kind of get like a baseline of whatever you want, and you can have it be more intricate or more where you only get basic stats, or you get all the background stats that you want. So that kind of made it easier for me to just kind of manage the new the new PCs that were coming in. And more often than not, I'd have somebody come in I had a core group of 3 people that would come once. It was just once a month for a couple of years. And every now and again, a new friend would hear about it, or a new skater would hear and want to come join. They'd come in for a couple of weekends and disappear. So then they'd come back and forth 2 or 3 times a year. And so then they just, instead of trying to keep track of everyone, or having to keep their player sheets or whatever, it was just, if they came in, I just had 2 or 3 random characters they could play. Usually it was just NPCs that I would be controlling. And then if someone new came in, they just get to play the NPCs for me.
Yeah, I've definitely done that with guest people before that want to show up for a little bit. So yeah, you play this person, then I don't have to work someone else into the party, and it already makes sense that you're there and all that. And is that the game that are you still playing with that group?
No, that group, they were back home in Texas. So now it's just been the homebrew. So I am also in the kink space.
Also some overlap there with D&D.
Yeah, not as much though. I mean, there is, but it's so in my experience, it's usually people that are kinksters already and then find D&D, but rarely have I seen anyone that's D&D and then finds kink. And that maybe I'm just saying that's in my experience. I'm sure there is that group, but so anyways, yeah, kinkster, had a couple of subs, girlfriends, whatever. One of them here in Reno, their was telling me that their daughter wanted to play D&D, but they couldn't find a group, or the group they had that she had found in high school, like there was like a D&D club in her high school, but they were like too nerdy and way too into it. And it intimidated her because she didn't want to show up and not know anything. She just wanted to play and have fun. So I said, oh, well, yeah, I do that kind of thing all the time. I, explain kind of the same thing where, I create character sheets. You just come in and play, and I'll explain any of the dynamics or, the gameplay, and explain that it's basically like paper World of Warcraft. And like, oh, okay, yeah. So then they were like, yeah, let's give it a try. And I'm like, well, since it's her birthday, like, does she have any like? I was thinking, does she want to be a wizard? Does she want to be sorceress? What character she wants to be? And so she asked, and it came back, no, well, she wants it to be Bob Ross. Wait, what do you mean Bob Ross? And she wants Bob Ross in it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I had to like get in touch with the daughter and like, hey, what do you mean? She goes, no, I don't care. I just, want Bob Ross to be a part of it. And there's Skyrim Oblivion, where there's like a kind of a quest line where we kind of jump into a painting. And that was kind of an idea I wanted to run with. Yeah. And so like, ooh, that'd be an idea. Like you jump into a Bob Ross painting with it. Okay, what are you doing? You finding paintings? And it just kind of, it was too convoluted for me. So at the end, I just decided, you know what? It'll just be Bob Ross. It'll be an evil Bob Ross that you fight. And as we played, the idea came about of, I think it was over 5 or 6 months that we were playing every other weekend. We'd miss some here and there, but it was essentially like 2 weekends a month for about 6 months. And, the gameplay, the BBEG at the end kind of fleshed itself out as fighting our way to find the bad guy that's terrorizing the town with his little painted minions, and that you have to go into a painted forest, and it is evil Bob Ross, and in this world, it is Rob Boss, and he is the bad part of our world's Bob Ross, and that's why Bob Ross in the real world is a nice guy and so happy and so sweet and so, nice and loving that he like cut out the evil bad part of him and painted him into a painting. And that's why we're stuck in this world, or that's why we have to like get rid of him, because he's trying to figure out a way to get back into the real world and take over ours. So that was kind of like, like developed over time. Like it didn't flesh itself out that easily in the beginning. It was just, we're going to fight evil Bob Ross at some point. I don't know who or how or where. Yeah. So that's how it kind of ended up being.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. The Oblivion one, it was that like the painter had gotten some like paint that makes real paintings, and then he'd gotten stuck inside of one of them, I think, because he'd painted a troll, and the troll had like
pulled him in or something. Yeah, it was
trapped him up on a mountain ridge or something like that.
Yeah, it'd been a while because I played Oblivion. I think I got the quest but never played it, and then had to kind of read about it online because I was trying to. I think I put a Reddit post on it too, like, hey, one of my girlfriend's kids wants to do this. Anybody have any ideas? And everybody kept throwing in the Oblivion one. So I read up on it, like, yeah, that's more complicated than I wanted to do it. So, anyways.
Yeah, I guess that came out like 20 years ago or something, close to that.
Yeah, but I mean, that's nothing compared to I've been playing since the 90s. So,
yeah. So the kid you were doing this for, how old is she?
She's 21 now, but at the time it was for her 14th, 15th birthday.
Oh, okay. All right. Kid for 21 feels excessive, but okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but so I'm Gen X. I'm late 40s now. So, anyone under 30 is a kid to me, but at the same time,
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And it's also, it's not derogatory, but I think of it more of, an 18-year-old, yes, is an adult, but I've kind of did the math, and like, they're just a baby adult. They're not an adult. Like you got to be an adult for 10 years before you really know how to be one, at least. So, anyways.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm in my 30s now, and yes, I see someone who's like, under 25, and it's like, there's a reason they're still sort of young adult classification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is a difference that comes with experience living in the adult world, definitely. Okay, so back to the game. I was asking about her age, like trying to get a gauge for what the group that you were playing with at the time. So it was
Oh,
her and who else?
so yeah, it was her mother, another sub. So everyone was, let's see. So she was the youngest. She was 15, 16. A 35-year-old, 32-year-old, a 27-year-old, and myself, which I think at the time I was 42, 43, someone there.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all like adults with one kid, one literal kid.
Okay.
And yeah. Oh, and my brother, sorry. And my brother, he was 52 at the time. So,
Uh,
but he's a murder hobo, and I just try to ignore him as much as possible.
Okay.
It's all good.
Excellent.
Yeah. So,
Okay. Well, let's talk more about the world that this took place in. So you
mm,
had Bob Ross as the villain, and he's hiding out in his painted fortress. Um, what was the community that he was threatening? Did you base that part off of anything?
it was basically just a random medieval town. It wasn't really anything big or overreaching. It was, we started off in a port city and didn't have a map drawn out. It was just every new game we'd flesh it out on one of those one by one uh, plastic mats
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of draw out whatever they're going to. And I have a bad habit of railroading my PCs, and not in the way of like, you're going to do what I tell you. It's more of they're going to talk to an NPC to get their quest. And it doesn't matter whether they want to go north, south, east, west, if they want to stay in town, if they want to take the river, if they're going to go into the town proper, go to the village. Wherever they go, the first NPC they meet is going to be the NPC that's going to give them the hints to their quest, essentially. Um,
Yes, I read about that in your survey, and there's a name for that style of DMing actually. That's based off of the Schrodinger cat theory.
mhm.
Do you know this
Okay.
one?
No, I've never heard of it. I've only heard of like railroading, and I'm like, I mean, I don't like the term, but I am kind of keeping them on track to meet the boss, regardless of where they go. But I hadn't heard that one.
What it's called for what you're doing is called the quantum ogre. Um,
Hmm.
it comes from Schrodinger's cat theory, where like there's this thing in like specific quantum physics for particles where
Mhm.
it can be in either a sort of dot shape or a wave shape, and you don't really know until you observe it.
Right.
And the theory was that if you have like a machine in a box that detects whether it's a dot shape or a wave shape, and if it's a wave shape, the machine will kill a cat that's also inside of the box.
Hmm.
But the particle isn't a dot or a wave until you observe it in one or the
Right.
other patterns. So the cat isn't dead or alive until you open the box and look at the particle to see if it's a dot or a wave.
Hmm.
Um, and that was extrapolated into this quantum ogre thing, where the ogre is neither north nor south of the village until the party leaves the village. And if they go north, then the ogre is north. And if they go south, then the ogre is south.
Okay. Yeah, I like that a lot better than the whole
Yeah.
railroading thing because I've mentioned it before, like how I play, and oh, you railroad them. I'm like, I mean, not really. I mean, I get railroading usually is no matter what they say, they're going to make it um, like they're being forced to turn certain directions. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you can't go that way because it's blocked. So you have to go back into town, and you're just adding more time to the gameplay. Where
Right.
if you want them specifically to go north and they go every direction, but it's blocked, then that annoys me because I played with DMs that were like that. That no matter what you did, you had to go north or you had to go in this direction. You had to go into the fortress. You couldn't go around an experiment or whatever. You had to go wherever they wanted you to go. But
Yeah.
so that was kind of like my idea of like I don't want to be that DM, but at the same time I want the game and story to progress. So
I think it's something that as a more mature player myself, it's kind of like your DM gives you something, and it's like that improv philosophy. You follow it because that's the adventure. Like if you ignore what the DM is saying and say, well, I don't want to go where the ogre is. I want to go and talk to the tailor about making new clothes. That's not what the DM brought for you to do. You're wasting their time and what they did to prepare something. So as a more mature player, it's like, here's the adventure hook. Let's do it because that's what we're here for.
yeah, I mean at the same time I get you have to gear up. You can't just fight all the time. So it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a mix of both. you kind of got to compromise, like with anything, any type of relationship. So
yeah.
but,
Anyways, yeah, it's I feel like the quantum ogre thing is sometimes defined as a type of railroading, but ideally you don't need to do that because you should have a group that wants to do the adventure.
oh yeah.
And sometimes with people that haven't played before and aren't used to the type of freedom that like tabletop RPGs give, because when you're like playing a video game, you kind of have to do the quest. Mm-hmm. Usually, I guess Link to the Past is actually an example that is not like that, but
yeah.
But a lot of games, you play a game and it's sort of a straight line from where you are to where you have to be. And when you get into like this more freeform RPG space of tabletop RPGs, you can do whatever you want. Like you can go talk to the tailor, and then the DM has to act like a tailor for a minute or two while you talk to the tailor. Whereas if you go talk to them in a video game, they might not even be an NPC that has dialogue. They might just go dot when you talk to them. So that type of freedom is nice, and I think with new players they can sometimes not understand that it still has some sort of like social contract restriction on it of, yes, you can do whatever you want, but you should do this because that's what I brought for you to do.
Yeah, and also because these are all, like, especially the past 5 or 6 years, it's always been new players. Other than my brother, who's a murder hobo, so I just ignore him. But everyone else, they're just brand new. They're in it with bright eyes, so I don't want to railroad them. But at the same time, I want them to be engaged to keep coming, so that way they learn and want to play and take the initiative to read whatever printout I give them, because I don't expect them to go out and buy a handbook or a player's guide or anything. I'll print out some stuff that's kind of like whatever, or I'll just send them some links. Hey, you can get X, Y, or Z for free, allegedly from a torrent site. But right. For the most part, if they really want to get invested into it, then I'll do more. But more often than not, they'll get a little bit invested and go play in other places. Because where I live is kind of out in the boondocks. It's kind of outside of the suburbs. It's annoying because I don't know where you're from, but so I'm from Houston. And so driving an hour to get a third of the way across town is normal. Like, it's no big deal. Like, no traffic, an hour to go out to eat or do whatever is nothing. But here in Reno, it's a small town. It's I think roughly 13, 14 miles in diameter. And so anything that's over 15 minutes, oh my God, that's so far away. So people coming out to play with me, they're like, oh man, you're all the way out there. Okay, fine, we'll go, because it's only once a month or it's only once whatever. So it's kind of like I'm there. I kind of pop their cherry, and then they decide to go play in town where there's more of a gaming culture or more available games for them that's closer to them in town without having to travel with me. So, in either way, it's still fun to kind of, get to see their enjoyment for the first time and, be all bright-eyed and excited. And like, oh, you can do this? Oh, man, this is better than a video game. Kind of get them to use their imagination in a sense.
Yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about. Like I'm in Sacramento, Davis, and yeah, there are parts of Sacramento that are an hour away, and it just feels like kind of too far. I don't want to do something more than half an hour of driving usually. But yeah, Texas is definitely even bigger than that, and I'm also reminded that like where that's for me in California, but then there's people on the East Coast that are even more densely populated areas where it's like, yeah, that's 15 minutes, that's too far. I don't want to go that far for driving.
Yeah, but they can go, within a mile and get anything and everything they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, New York City, if you can't walk to what you need, then that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was like a sort of basic fantasy town, and then you had sort of the quantum ogre philosophy for introducing the villain. And how long did the campaign take? Was it kind of like just one solid adventure, or did you kind of like loop together sort of sub villains before they got to Rob Boss?
There was 3 sub villains. There was a kobold that escaped his painting that was the size of an orc. There was a half orc mutation, and I forgot what my bat was. It was a bat that would fling swarms of hornets, and that one, everybody, it was a party wipe on that one because nobody had any splash damage. So had to kind of like, okay, well, we reset it and kind of like, okay, this is well, you got to pay attention to when a DM says, hey, you might want to hit the town for supplies. And, whenever you get kind of like that meta recommendation, that means, hey, you're going to see something. And, again, it was still trying to kind of like, hey, this kind of thing can happen. You're not going to always win. You're not always going to survive. And other DMs, you'll just have to start at 0, but you can just kind of like, hey, you respawn because it's a painting. So they were in the painted forest already. So kind of like, okay, you're back to real life. You're no longer your painted selves. And it was frustrating and exciting at the same time for me as a DM because I hadn't had the chance to experiment. More often than not, they were just kind of one-shot games with other players back home in Texas because even though I had a constant rotation, nobody liked grinding all the way up to level 12 or 20 or whatever it was. We just kind of got to hover around 10. So the core group back home kind of like just staying at 5. Let's just stay at 5, no XP, no worry about anything else. We'll just play with the skill set. So with these were all level 2 players by the time they wiped. And, it was frustrating because I didn't know where I was going. I was making some of the stuff up on the fly. And other times it was like watching your kid learning how to ride a bike and falling. And you want them to ride the bike so you don't have to worry about them, but you still have to worry about them because there's cars in the street. There's all these other things. So it's, wanting them to move faster than what they're ready for, but at the same time, then there's more dangers for them. And especially with the party wipe, you're like, okay, crap. Are they going to be more cautious? Are they going to be too cautious in the future? Are they going to be just the right amount of cautious? Or are they going to think, oh, well, we survived. We re-woke up unpainted. So now we just get to start over. As long as we're painted, we can start over again. But they didn't abuse the system because they weren't thinking that far ahead. And I guess me with that much experience, I would think of ways of how to game or beat the system and piss off the DM. Like, hey, well, you said this is a rule. This is, whatever. And exploit whatever a DM allows me versus these group of people. They were just excited to play and do something new. So it was a mix of emotions that rarely, I guess, as a DM, you get to share because, you're the DM. You have to be in charge. You have to be, in control of the whole thing, So you can't.
Yeah.
I being like a therapist. Like you just got to be there and crying through it. I don't know.
Do you feel like you enjoyed that process, or was it something you felt like you more just kind of had to do to be able to play the game you wanted?
A little of both. It was more exciting because it was, doing something new, or not new, but doing something. It was fun and exciting because they were new players and because they weren't like me. They're all very, optimistic people. And with the normal group of players that I'm used to having, being, roller derby, counterculture, subculture people, sometimes you run into people that are going to be figuring out a way to be exploitive. With this group, these are all very goody two shoes, traditional, other than one, my brother, the jerk. But one of the girls, she was, into punk music, was in punk in the 80s. So she was very counterculture, but she didn't abuse the system. She didn't think that way. So it was refreshing to know that there's good people in the world. But at the same time, it was frustrating because I was overthinking things. I was anticipating exploits, anticipating dozens of questions, and a lot of times I just kind of ran with it. And the only time they would ask for an explanation is, okay, well, I rolled this and my AC is that. So how come it didn't hit? Okay, well, the enemy's AC is higher. You don't get to know their AC until you X, Y, or Z. So those explanations were fine. It was just the frustration of myself defeating myself and overthinking of what to anticipate for my players instead of enjoying the moment. And as we played longer and longer, I got to relax and enjoy the fact that they're enjoying it, they're learning, and they weren't going to go away because they're all part of this neighborhood that I'm in. They're in this subdivision, and so they're not going to escape and run away and go play in town because town is too far for them.
Okay, yeah, that is definitely a difference. Like, I feel like a lot of people who are coming into the RPG initially, like tabletop RPGs, come from video games. Like in Diablo, you have like a town portal. You can kind of just leave
Mm-hmm.
whenever you want, and there's no consequence. Then you can pop right back where you were before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's definitely a change that people experience.
Which is funny. We all started playing Diablo together too. Well, most of us. There was two that didn't, but four of us started playing Diablo 3 together, and it was kind of fun because they're like, "Oh, hey, this is kind of like that." Like, well, yeah, but you can't just tell. There's no teleportation. You can't go to town. Oh, okay. So, well, why not? Like, I mean, I could make it a thing, but it's more work for me. No, we're not doing portal. Okay, fine. So,
okay, one of the things that you mentioned in your survey that I wanted to talk about was the sort of like you described it as like kind of like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where
mhm.
the painted creatures are more like animated.
Animation, cartoon, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean my reference is the Oblivion Quest where they looked painted, but it was like a very realistic painting. So
Hmm.
the models were very similar to the real models for the enemies and the things that you encountered in the painted world. Um, and it sounds like you're going more in a different direction where the painted creatures look more like caricatures and kind of animate like caricatures, where they're more like
Hmm.
bouncy and stretchy. Is that right?
It was more just kind of like the idea that I presented to him. Like, imagine a painting cut out and they're in real life. And, from your perspective, it looks 3D, but if you, what is it? If you do a wedge formation and it's around them, you know, the only the person facing them head on is going to see that animation, and anyone off to the sides is going to see that it's two dimensional. And so use that to your advantage. And so eventually they figured out the melee attackers would flank and the caster would be facing on trying to draw their attention. So then that way a side cut from or a slashing attack from melee would cut them in half and
Oh,
reduce their
okay.
AC by half. So they were basically cartoons or paintings that were just kind of cut out and come to life. So their arms would be able to move. It wasn't like a cutout that if you try to raise your arms it tears. Like their animation would be like a cartoon, like in Roger Rabbit or Cool World, where they're moving around, they're doing whatever they're doing. But if you get on a certain angle, you'll see that they're two dimensional and you can slice them. And if you cut them in half, it would cut their AC in half, but you'd have to deal with two new enemies. And so you had to work together where you had the caster do something that would get rid of the paper, or the canvas. And so you'd have to freeze it or burn it or melt it with acid or some type of damage in that way. So uh,
Okay.
it was a lot of trial and error because I was like, okay, how do we defeat them? Because if they're paper, do they really have AC? Does it really have to have a, AC 18 and X, Y, and Z and, their hit points? Does it really matter? So instead of focusing on their hit points, it was more of how to get rid of the paper. And because just attacking with fire head on, well, there's no edges for it to catch fire because you're hitting it dead center. So then you had to deal with the AC. But if you got rid of the AC in half and then attack with fire, so it was more forcing them to work as a team because they kind of wanted to do 1-on-1, 1v1 with all the enemies. So
Hmm. Okay, that's a really cool idea. I like that a lot.
and so that was a certain section too. Yeah, so it was like the painted forest. So the normal town and village, everyone in town, the villagers, everyone else were normal humans. Because once you got to the edge of the forest, that was the quote painted forest, is when you started dealing with enemies that were like this. The real world enemies, like the goblins, the first overgrown kobold was the only painted character. So it was starting as a mix. They only had one painted character and regular kobolds that they fought against. Then it was kind of half and half mix of the half orc and goblins that were painted. the regular kobolds were real kobolds. And then once he got inside the painted forest, and everything was painted enemies.
I was thinking like in a lot of the shows and movies where animation crosses over with live action, it's always, I mean, maybe it's not animated in 3D, but it's assumed that the animated characters are three-dimensional within that crossover. So it's a very different take on it where they're still two-dimensional. You just sort of don't know it until you trick them into letting you see that they're two-dimensional. And it somewhat reminds me of how Mickey Mouse works within his fictional universe. I don't know if you've seen this effect for him, but like his ears don't like rotate with they kind of rotate with his body so that they're always perfect circles facing the audience.
Right. Yeah, whenever he turns his head, they stay in place.
Yeah. So when he turns around, his ears don't actually like turn with him. Like his left ear just becomes his right ear when he turns around. I'm just reminded of that because that's he's sort of a quasi two-dimensional character even within what's assumed to be a three-dimensional, like for the cartoons experience, because his ears don't function as three-dimensional objects.
I hadn't thought of that or paying that much attention to it. I think I must have missed that.
I don't know. I watch cartoons with my kids, and it's just like, wow, that's a weird ear.
Right.
Because they're so simple. I'm just like trying to find something to be like latch onto that's more complex, and it ended up being Mickey's ears. So when I watch the show, I'm always looking for weird ears. Don't know why I thought of that, but so it sort of progressed in from like more real enemies that they were facing into more painted enemies as they got deeper into the painted forest.
Correct.
Okay, that feels very similar to kind of like going into hell, where you're facing cultists and skeletons, and then as you get deeper, you're facing like demons and other stuff like that.
Something like that, yeah. It was Dante's Inferno was kind of overarching idea. As they got deeper and deeper, you see more of the depravity that's going on, but without the actual depravity, because we did have a 16-year-old in the game. But it was fun trying to come up with these kind of things, because it was just like, well, shit, how do I get them to meet the evil Bob Ross? And there was some cartoon or like a 4-panel cartoon of like I want to say it was a metalhead Bob Ross or something, but it's a black and white. Where did I see it? It's going to bug me. But he had face paint that kind of looks similar to Gene Simmons's face paint, but he was like a demonic or satanic or metalhead Bob Ross, and I was like, okay, so that's going to be my evil Bob Ross. He's going to have that kind of look. Now I can't. Basil Bob Ross.
Oh, Beelzebub. Okay.
Yeah.
That's another name for the devil.
And so that kind of like, I stumbled upon that, and that gave me okay, so this is what my Rob Boss is going to look like. And what's going to happen between them. Because I didn't want the demon part. I just wanted to keep it, because I didn't want to like introduce demons in addition to the fantasy, kobolds, goblins, orcs, bats, and all the other typical minions that you run into, without having to go into a whole evil universe or traversing the underworld. And what mythology or what am I going to use? Am I going to go with Norse? Am I going to use Greek? What am I going to go with? So let me just stick to just simple. Bob Ross is just painting evil minions of this world.
Did you bring any like other PBS heroes into the campaign?
No, that was just the only focus. Like I said, she only wanted Bob Ross. I was like, okay, fine. After the fact, because I wrote about it somewhere. I did a blog post or something about this kind of whole thing, and someone thought about what do you call it, Reading Rainbow with LeVar Burton, and I was like, you know what? I could have gone so many ways. I could have added that, made him like an evil Geordie, and then Mr. Rogers just kind of like, okay, well, who would be the boss of bosses in that? I would think the most unassuming Mr. Rogers would have to be the most evil of all. Him being the nicest of all, he had to be the most evil of all, and he would be like the hierarchical. And I think LeVar Burton, his number two, and Bob Ross was a henchman only because he could paint new minions. And who's my other one? There's somebody
Steve
else.
Irwin, I think, is usually lumped in with them.
He usually is, but I don't think he was on PBS. I think I started going with Sesame Street. So evil Sesame Street characters that Bob Ross would paint. There's another one. I can think of
Barney, the purple dinosaur.
Yeah, I guess I could have gone with that. But the only ones that really not even fleshed out, just toyed in my mind was just Mr. Rogers and trying to figure out a Star Trek crossover with LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow and Bob Ross. Then I kind of got stuck with those three. Like, okay, how would it work out? And then probably a year or two after that, I kind of read a journal entry. I was like, oh, hey, maybe I should do Sesame Street too. But it never turned anything because, all the other players kind of moved on and nobody else had an interest in playing, a Bob Ross rural, homebrew. So,
I mean, maybe you should do it even with people that are interested. Maybe that's the kind of thing that you need to get a longer campaign going. some weird stuff like that. How did it go for the players as they progressed? Like, did they become more sure of themselves? And I guess how did the final confrontation go as well?
Like, they were more sure of themselves with their characters, so they understood the dynamics, they understood their roles and what they had to do. And then it was funny because towards the end they wanted to not roll for initiative, do perception checks on everything because they got because after the party wipe for not paying attention, essentially, then they started it slowed everything to. I'm not a crawl, but it slowed everything down significantly where they would perception check every 5 minutes. Say, I want to do perception check for X, Y, and Z. And okay, they had to play along because I didn't want to tell them, hey, you don't have anything to worry about for the next, until you get to this point. So it slowed things down a bit, but it was interesting to see how they were progressing because now they were working more as a unit, more as a team. And so then they started always walking together, not walking clustered, but always walking in a wedge formation to where, if anything, came upon them, there'd always be someone in the rear that could, be not have to roll for initiative because they would be outside of engagement, and then they could pivot around and attack from the side, or they would be the one that would get in the rear would get attacked first, and they could call out and let the others know, hey, okay, be ready, I'm being attacked, come and help me.
Yeah, that's a real evolution for players, and they realize they need to have a marching order.
Yeah, and so it was kind of funny that they progressed into it without any prompting, without any suggesting, other than, hey, pay attention to when I tell you need to shop for whatever. And so when they got to the final final Rob Boss encounter, it's funny because it's always a tongue twister when you try to say it. They made mincemeat out of him pretty quick because the sorceress used Cone of Frost and just kind of obliterated a bunch of the little minions that I kind of set up for them. And so then I was only left with a orc and Bob Ross. I'm like, well, shit, how am I going to get them, make this a little more challenging for them? And, he could only paint a new character or new enemy, 2 new enemies per turn. I was like, well, shit, am I going to waste time with him painting new enemies, and do they just keep, freezing them or destroying them away, or am I going to get them in a fight? So eventually it just kind of went faster than anticipated, but they had fun because then they were going through and looting everything and realizing that his paintbrush was what made everything special in a sense. So when they destroyed this paintbrush, then it turned everything to normal, and it made a new little kind of Snow White fairyland type forest that was corrupted by the painting. And so by breaking the spell on the paintbrush, it turned everything to normal. Everyone was happy, and they got all their prizes at the end. But it was still fun, even though they made mincemeat of my BBEG, and they're like, that wasn't that hard. The orc was harder. I was like, well, yeah, I didn't think you'd get to that close together and, be that tactical, because I was still thinking they were still as naive as they were early on. Like they progressed really well. And, without any prompting, without any, input from me, really, they worked together as a unit and, made me look like a dumbass, but whatever, it's still good to know that they learned and grew. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want to reward like them playing smart too, right?
Oh yeah. So they're like, okay, well, I was only going to give you, originally I was going to just let them keep the paintbrush and let them do whatever they want with the world and paint their own treasure, paint their own reward. And, they didn't have to actually be good painters. Like my idea was, okay, you are a barbarian and blah, blah, blah. You're going to, you can paint yourself a belt of might, or you can paint your belt and make it into a belt of might, or you can paint your sword or whatever. Like each character would have enough paint to do one of their items to make it, magical or better. And I forgot how they did it. Well, what if we just break the paint brush and they just snapped it? I'm like, crap, okay, what am I going to do? So off the fly, I said, okay, well, now the world is, the paint is melted away and disappearing, and kind of explain what happened. And I was like, do they believe this? Like I was just, talking out of my ass and just spewing, okay, yeah, well, now the world is this and this is going on. And what do you want to do now? I'm like, okay, cool. That's great. We saved the world. I'm like, well, yeah, you did. Okay, sure. That was kind of the point. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if I don't want some like sort of physical reward at the end of the campaign, you don't really need to provide one.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be that's the end. Okay, cool.
But I mean, that's like the habit too. That's kind of like, at least, in my experience with, playing with other DMs, it's kind of always a thing. Okay, you get a nice big reward, and whether you're going to play again or not, you have this nice cache of, magical weapons, or, this huge treasure trove of gold or whatever. And so that was what I was used to doing and giving away. But again, these were new people that didn't have any expectations other than my brother, who, he and I played Diablo 3 all the time. So, that was just kind of like, okay, now it's the end of the season. You get this special reward for doing all these heroic chests. And with them, it was just like, okay, yeah, we saved the world, and let's go tell the town and see what they have for us. We'll go, and you come up with something.
Well, it sounds like it was a really good experience for you. Do you feel like it's sort of informed your DMing since then for how you approach what you're doing?
Yeah, and like I really love the way it opened my eyes to not do things the way it's always done, because that's how it's always done. It's you're used to doing things because that's how your DM did it, and probably how their DM did it with them, and going all the back to 1970 whatever.
Right.
And this way, I prefer playing homebrew with newbie players that want to kind of dip their toes in, and whether they stick with it or not, it's refreshing. And so whenever I do end up playing a regular game, which I miss, because it's difficult to jump back and forth between DMing and just getting to be a player, but it's also relaxing that you just get to play, you get to roll your dice and do whatever. But I appreciate now both sides, and again, I prefer having homebrew games, not having to stick to the rules and look something up real quick because you haven't done it in a while. And also that's where I would be now if I had to DM a real campaign. I'm like, oh crap, I got to get a rule book and a player's guide and everything else, and relearn all the mechanics, and
right.
Get called out by someone. Oh well, fireball is supposed to be 3d6, and you did 2d8. Like, okay, fine, let's re-roll it or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, fireball's the same, but there's definitely spells that are different like that.
So yeah, you have to focus on the actual mechanics and all the dice rolls. And if you go too far in a campaign, like, wait a minute, we've been doing 2d8, it's supposed to be 3d6 or 1d12, whatever. You forgot to add this modifier, that modifier, and so homebrew is just easier for me, more fun because you get to enjoy. I get to enjoy watching them grow versus being so focused on the math.
Have you ever heard of the E6 approach to D&D?
Mm-mm. No, I haven't.
It came out for third edition, and it works decently well for other editions. Maybe not as necessary for fifth, but it would still work for Pathfinder. I think decently well. But the idea is that the players stop leveling up at sixth level, and that's when like all of the like main casting classes have third level spells, because some of them got them at fifth and some of them at sixth level. Then you get your fireball for your wizards and your iconic spell, and your sorcerers, and all of the fighter types get their second attack at sixth level because that's when the basic attack bonus goes to +6/+1. And then you just stop leveling up there. And whenever you would level up again after that point, you get to pick a feat. So you kind of just keep getting feats and more feats. And then the E6 system also introduces a few more feats to like, you can get more skill points that way and broaden out that. Or you can, if you're a fighter, you can take like greater weapon focus as a feat, which usually is only available at like 8th level, but you can get it as a fighter if you're a fighter. Or a barbarian can take improved rage, or a cleric can take raise dead as a feat, but they can only cast it like once per month. Or stuff like that, where you can get like higher level abilities, but it takes a feat, and then there's a big restriction on it in that way.
It does sound fun.
Yeah, and then you're kind of stuck there. So if you end up facing like some powerful demon, you have to figure out how to beat it, like with the tools that you have. You can't like come back. Oh, we'll come back when we're stronger. It's like no, you're where you are.
Yeah.
And it keeps like what the players can do at a somewhat realistic level. I think there was an article on the Alexandrian blog like a long time ago, which maybe is not as relevant anymore. But the idea was that like a lot of that D&D like makes sense for a lot of the things that it does, like trying to be a simulationist game. But within the framework that like a lot of heroes that we read about in like Lord of the Rings, Aragorn was the example used in that blog, are like 5th or 6th level. They don't get stronger than that because that's about as strong as a real person can get. And after that, you get into more like, heroic fantasy kind of stuff where it's just like, oh, okay, this person is, your strength goes up to 24 because you keep increasing it, or you get like a belt of might, like you said. And now this person is, like lifting cars over their head, which is something a real person can't do.
In theory, I think mothers, well, not over their head, but high enough to pull out their kid. But yeah, no, I get the point.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I said over your head. I know people can lift cars.
Right. That's when I said it. I was like, oh no, wait, yeah, he said overhead.
Yeah. But yes, adrenaline is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, bad. It is. Especially for old adrenaline junkies. Geez, I'm too old to do that crap anymore. But yeah, that's that. You know what? I think I want to start playing again under that kind of thing. But to find groups that'll be that specific. That's why I miss big cities, because you can find just about anything, niche like that. Finding that E6 D&D or even Pathfinder here in Reno, and then getting everybody to be on the same schedule to do that. That'd be, I might as well just play in my mind. But it does seem feasible and more fun and enjoyable overall, just because you have to think more of just like, oh yeah, I can just cast 2 fireballs today. We'll do a long rest, and then we'll do whatever we need to
do. Yeah. Well, that's a different problem where you kind of want to structure your adventure so you can't just like go run and hide for a day. But yeah.
Yeah.
What's stopped you from wanting to play online?
really the cost. Like I'm stubborn in a sense. So most apps, like paid apps, at least for Mac, and it's getting better recently, but almost every app is on a subscription. The few that are paid, you have a trial, and the ones that do have trials normally either are a week or maybe 2 weeks, a few or even a month. But you only have a limited amount of time to try out a new application. And sometimes even the trial period, you're limited on what you can do. So you have no real feel or understanding of how to use the app or whether you really use it as much as you'd like to. Or because of the restrictions, you don't use it to its full potential and you say, I'm not going to use this. So what I usually do is download a cracked version, an unpaid version of, or the full version of the game without, or full version of the app without paying for it. And when I use it long enough and I get the notification, hey, there's a new update, then I say, okay, you know what? I've been using it. It is worthwhile. Let me go ahead and buy it. And so, yeah, I do technically pirate for a while, but I do end up paying and buying things.
I mean, you're just doing an unofficial demo.
Pretty much, yeah. So like with DaVinci Resolve Studio, I edit videos and wanted the full version to try it out. And this was back in version 14. So that's just the background of it. But with playing online, a lot of them are subscription, and I abhor anything that's subscription based. Like I get that it keeps developers going and keeps developers going and making updates and making the game or application better. But at the same time, I feel like corporations have gotten too greedy with it, especially with inflation and everything else that goes on. So that is a long-winded way of just saying that I don't like playing things online in that sense, because you usually have to pay a subscription. If there was I'd be fine with the $500 lifetime thing, lifetime whatever. But the risk with that is some things you do pay for a lifetime and then that company gets sold or goes under and now you don't get the value for it. The only thing I really got in the value for a lifetime subscription is Plex. Other than that, a lot of things that I've paid for a lifetime subscription for has been sunsetted, 5, 10, 15 years ago already. So,
yeah, I know what you're talking about. I like to own my software, and it feels like with subscription basis, you don't get to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there actually is one that I know of that is owned called Foundry, I think is its name, where it is, I think, a single purchase of $100 gets the software, and then they still do updates, and you get the updates, but that's it. You're good. You get it for $100. So yeah, maybe check that one out. I've heard a lot of good things about that. One of my friends uses it. I was thinking I would use it next time I'm in the DM chair. I'm not at the moment for my group. But that seems like it's exactly what you're describing. So I would take a look at that one.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking more of like Beyond and what is it, Roll20, and there's another challenger to Roll20. Is it Roll20? Something like that. But I mean, yeah, where you kind of like come together and it's still, they're all cobbled together, it feels like. Well, other than Beyond. But even with DnD, I don't know why I cannot get behind DnD anymore. Like ever since 4.0, I really got turned off. So I just always been stuck with Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Yeah. The access to the rules definitely can also feel like it's a bit of an inhibitor because 4th edition didn't come with an SRD. Pathfinder has a great SRD though. You can find everything there. I don't think you have to pay for a book to play if you don't want to.
No.
Yeah, the books are better for understanding what you're reading, I think, because it's really just the rules. It doesn't have a lot of the descriptive for what the rules are trying to do. But
sorry, I just remembered why it was with D&D. My problem. It's more a problem with Wizards of the Coast than with D&D itself, because the retroactive of, okay, well, everything you've made for D&D is now our property and you have to pay for it. That was something that really rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, hey, these creators have, they don't make a fortune, but they make a little side hustle. They make a little bit of money, selling something that supplements or adds to the value of your product, to your IP. and now you're going to take the money that they would be making from now and claiming it as yours. It's almost like the whole Adobe thing, which I'm so glad I'm not even. That's a whole other whatever. But
Yeah,
anyways,
but I agree. That was very, very slimy. A lot of people hated it, and it had a very clear effect on D&D as a product. Like a lot of people left it for Pathfinder because of that, and like a lot of companies that were producing like D&D adjacent, like third-party content said that they weren't going to do it anymore. They had started producing like their own game systems to play in and start producing stuff for. So I think that OGL thing that happened, like, was that a year or two ago, definitely is leaving some scars on the industry. That you're just one of the people that's experiencing that.
yeah, and again, like I'd forgotten about it because I just said, "Oh, I'm not going to do anything with D&D," but it's not D&D. I just remember it as D&D, but it was Wizard of the Coast. So yeah, it's just, but still, it's like you said, it affects the whole community, and it's like a slap in the face in a way, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's like this like not just a social contract, like a real contract that they were trying to break with
Mm-hmm.
that, because you can't just like retroactively revoke a license for something in that way. Well, I'm glad they walked it back, but it sort of indicates that they might be willing to try something like that again. And I mean, they did kind of do that with fourth edition. Like fourth edition came out and didn't have an open gaming license for it. So there was that's was another reason that Pathfinder was able to exist, is that fourth edition was really different and also said, no, we will not support third-party content. So I think that drove a lot of people away.
But I think it also helped the community in the sense that it made creators decide, hey, you know what, I can do this, and because it all started with a couple of guys in the basement, anyways. Like they just started it out of the blue. So what's to stop anyone else?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think a lot of it's for like the explosion of RPGs now is just being able to play them online has made
Mm-hmm.
it much easier to get into the space as for everybody, like just as a DM, for being able to find groups, players for finding groups, and for content, like content producers, whether you're making adventures or systems or just like art, whatever. It's also just easier to sell that, or just let it be seen by other people. That's definitely felt like that's a expansion of not just D&D, but like everything in general.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now for RPGs? I mean, we were talking about the Bob Ross thing, but that happened like you said a couple
Yeah,
years
that
ago.
was, yeah, it was. I played off and on, or DM'd off and on for a couple of years. I think the last one was beginning of COVID, where I got a bunch of friends together. We did Zoom for a couple, and then just I fell into podcasting, and then fell into video editing. It kind of fell by the wayside. So now, as far as RPG goes, it's just a couple of friends and I get together and we do Diablo 4. Um, that's about it. Haven't gone back into tabletop, yeah, since March, April of 2020.
All right, well, I hope I'm tickling your funny bone for that, and you'll want to get to do more of it soon.
You are, especially now reading up on Foundry BBT. Like, you know what? Now if I could just find some old friends to get back together, and time zones and whatnot.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you wanted to cover that you felt like we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Just to listeners, I mean, if you're actively playing, don't give up. I mean, don't. Yeah, I'm one to talk. Look who's talking. But yeah, I mean, I think it helps engage your mind and just being creative, thinking outside the box, and working together as a team. I mean, there was recently, or not recently, sorry, at least since COVID, I would pay attention. But there was something about how to add your D&D experience to your resume and to make you look better for employers. Team building and coordinating, and I forget the whole thing, but just look up D&D, add to your resume, and it's a lot of out of the box creative thinking as far as how to make yourself more marketable, especially in the marketplace today with inflation and everything. Just, don't shy away from whatever nerdiness you have in your background and use it to your advantage.
Yeah, I actually included in my cover letter for jobs that I apply to.
Do you say D&D or do you just use the euphemisms about it?
No, I say D&D. Like I say, I've been playing for this many years. I learn creativity. Like I still say all the buzzwords from that in the cover letter.
Right. Okay. Oh, cool. Right on.
But yeah, I think it's a cool little strategy to use, and I think it's I mean, maybe it doesn't get me every job that I ever apply for, but it certainly, I feel like it's the kind of thing that
sets you apart for sure.
I mean, well, everyone else is doing it like you're telling them to, but what I was going to say is that the people that the employers that like that being in the cover letter are the kind of people that I want to work for. That that's a interesting and positive message for them to read, and for those where it's not, then I kind of, if they feel like, oh, why did you tell me that? That's gross and nerdy. Like, I kind of don't want to work for someone like that. So it feels like it's sort of provides a selection tool for both people within the process,
Yeah. I think I'll add that it's D&D versus just the buzzwords. That'll be
I mean, like every resume can have like a little skills section. You can put it there.
Right. Well, no, I was just saying, but you might. It could also be, shooting yourself in the foot where you have someone that's totally against D&D, but for Pathfinder, and if you say one or the other, you get yourself excluded. Oh, he's one of those, or he doesn't. Why doesn't he play Cyberpunk, or why doesn't he play? Shadowrun, or all the other, the monster ones. I'm like, So, but still, I don't think you'll get blackballed because of it if someone doesn't like your rule set.
I think that specific thing only happens if you're applying to jobs like within the RPG industry, because I feel like outside of it, like everyone else just kind of uses D&D as a shorthand and doesn't understand that the tabletop RPG space is, I mean, maybe not a lot more diverse than D&D, but has other stuff besides D&D.
Certainly.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Guy. It was really good talking to you.
Yeah, it was fun. It's been a while since I've had a conversation about this or actually it's the first time on a podcast, but outside of friends and nerds, yeah, it's been fun to relive this and get the fire going to try again.
Yeah. I think you'll have some fun, whether you go forwards with it or not. Like, at least being able to think about it again and re-examine that part of your life is really good. In order for the podcast to continue, I really need more guests to volunteer to be on the show. So if you're interested, or if you know someone who is interested, please go to gocorral.com/STS to learn more about how to apply to be on the show. That's GOCORRAL.com/STS.